The grand chamber of the Galactic Council sparkled like a field of stars, its crystalline walls reflecting the bioluminescent glow of 1,000 different species. Commander Sarah Chen stood at the chamber's entrance, her sturdy frame and practical uniform marking her as distinctly different from the ethereal beings that floated and drifted through the space. After 2 years as Earth's representative to the Council, she still found herself amazed by the sheer diversity of life in the galaxy, and equally amazed by how fragile most of it was. The emergency session alert had caught everyone by surprise. In the Council's 10,000-year history, only 3 such sessions had ever been called. Chen watched as the various representatives took their positions, their movements graceful in the chamber's low gravity. She made her way to her own seat, her magnetic boots clicking against the floor, a sound that still made several nearby representatives flinch. High Counselor Zixra, a being of pure energy contained within an ornate field generator, pulsed with urgent patterns. Esteemed representatives, we face a crisis unprecedented in our modern era. The luminary system has begun to collapse. A collective gasp rippled through the chamber. Chen leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. The luminary were among the oldest civilizations in the galaxy, beings of crystalline light who had achieved technological mastery, while humans were still learning to make fire. Their home system was a marvel of stellar engineering, their worlds carefully positioned to harvest the energy of their ancient sun. We received their distress signal 42 minutes ago, Zixra continued, their energy form flickering with distress. Their star has entered an unexpected decay cascade. The luminary's models predict total system collapse within 30 standard days. The chamber erupted in voices, each species communicating in their own way, light patterns, pheromones, electromagnetic pulses. Chen activated her neural translator, letting the cacophony resolve into understandable speech. Impossible. They're stellar engineering. Can we evacuate them? The radiation levels alone. Their physical form requires specific conditions. Zixra pulsed for silence. The luminary cannot survive anywhere but their home system. Their crystalline bodies require specific frequencies of radiation and gravitational conditions that exist nowhere else in known space. They are, in effect, trapped. Surely with our combined technology, began the Melraxi representative, their flower-like form trembling. We have analyzed all possibilities, interrupted Sub-Counselor Ven, their holographic form projecting graphs and calculations into the chamber center. The conditions in the luminary system are deteriorating rapidly. The radiation levels are now at 40,000 times standard tolerance. The gravitational fluctuations would tear apart any known ship. The temperature differentials. They paused. It is, by every measure we possess, impossible to reach them. Chen felt a familiar sensation building in her chest, the same feeling she'd had as a rescue pilot on Earth, when someone would say a storm was too strong or a fire too hot to attempt a rescue. She accessed her neural link, pulling up the raw data from the luminary system. The numbers were staggering, yes, but... High Counselor, she said, her voice cutting through the chamber's despair. Earth would like to volunteer assistance. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, like a wave, nervous laughter rippled through the assembly. The Melraxi representatives' pedals curled with what Chen had learned was their equivalent of a condescending smile. Commander Chen, they said, with all due respect, your species has barely mastered basic interstellar travel. The technology needed for this is different from what you're thinking. Chen interrupted, standing. Her magnetic boots disengaged with a click that echoed in the chamber. You're right. We don't have your level of technology. What we do have is experience dealing with conditions you consider impossible. She gestured to the holographic display. These radiation levels. We've developed shielding that can handle worse while studying our planet's Van Allen belts. The gravitational stresses, similar to what our deep-sea vehicles deal with daily. The temperature differentials. She allowed herself a small smile. We call that Tuesday in some of our more volatile regions. Impossible, whispered the Melraxi representative. no species could evolve to handle. We did, Chen said simply. Earth isn't what you call a gentle world. Everything on it either evolved to handle extreme conditions or die trying. We're built for this sort of thing. The luminary need help that your technology can't provide, she continued. But where you see impossible conditions, we see just another day at work. Where you see certain death, we see a challenge to overcome. She turned to face Zixra. Let us help. After all, that's what neighbors do. The High Counselor's energy field pulsed with complex patterns as they consulted with other council members through quantum links. Finally, they turned back to Chen. Tell us, Commander of Earth, what would you need? Chen's smile widened. First, I need to make a call to Earth's Deep Space Rescue Division. And then, she looked up at the holographic display of the dying star system. I need you to tell me everything you know about the luminary's crystal physiology. We're going to need to get creative with this one. As she began outlining her initial plans, Chen noticed the other representatives watching her with new eyes. They still saw humans as dangerous. That wouldn't change overnight. But perhaps now they would begin to understand that being dangerous wasn't always a bad thing. Sometimes, when the universe threw impossible odds at you, dangerous was exactly what you needed to be. The observation deck of Earth's orbital command center hummed with activity as Commander Chen stood before her hastily assembled team. Through the reinforced windows, she could see their ship, the DSV Stardancer, being prepped for launch. Its dark hull, covered in experimental heat-dispersing scales, looked primitive compared to the sleek alien vessels nearby. But Chen knew appearances could be deceiving. Ladies and gentlemen, she addressed the group, you're here because you're the best at handling the impossible. The holoscreen behind her displayed the deteriorating luminary system. We have 28 days to save an entire civilization. Dr. Maya Patel, Earth's leading expert in extreme environment physics, studied the data scrolling across her tablet. Her cybernetically enhanced eyes, adapted for seeing in extreme conditions, glowed softly as they processed the information. The star's decay is accelerating. These energy readings, they're unlike anything we've encountered. But not beyond what we can handle, interrupted Kate Rodriguez, the team's deep space survival specialist. Her scared face bore testament to countless rescue missions in Earth's most dangerous environments. She pointed to a particular data stream. The radiation shielding we developed for the Jupiter colonies could be modified for this. Beside them, Dr. James Wong, their xenobiologist, was already running simulations on his quantum computer. His prosthetic arms, necessary after an accident in the Marianas Research Station, moved with fluid precision as he manipulated the holographic displays. The luminary's crystalline structure is fascinating. They've evolved to require their sun's specific radiation frequency for sustenance. But if we can replicate that frequency, the observation deck's door slid open, admitting their alien observers. The Melraxi representative entered first, their flower-like form contained within a protective field. Behind them came Zixra, their energy form dimmed to avoid interfering with human equipment, and a holographic projection of Sub-Counselor Ven. They froze at the entrance, their environmental sensors flashing warnings at the various hazard signs posted around the human facility. Caution, high gravity zone. Warning, radiation shielding required. And danger, extreme temperature variations normal. Welcome to Earth Orbital, Chen said, trying to sound reassuring. Please remain in the designated safe zone. We maintain Earth normal conditions in our working areas. The aliens' translation unit struggled to process the casual way the humans discussed conditions that would kill most species instantly. Your vessel, Zixra pulsed, indicating the Stardancer through the window. It appears primitive. Chief Engineer Marcus Torres grinned, his heavy world-enhanced muscles flexing as he brought up the ship's schematics. Sometimes the old ways work best. We've based her design on deep-sea submersibles. The hull's a metamaterial that gets stronger under pressure. The cooling system, he chuckled, Borrowed that from our volcanic research stations. Impossible, the Melraxi representative whispered, their petals trembling. Your species routinely operates in such conditions. Someone has to maintain the hydrogen mines in Jupiter's atmosphere, Rodriguez shrugged, and the methane processing plants on Titan, and the solar observation posts that orbit inside Mercury's orbit. Dr. Patel pulled up the mission timeline. We'll begin our approach in 12 hours. The Stardancer's systems are rated for conditions far worse than what we expect to encounter. She looked at their alien observers with a gentle smile. We understand this seems impossible to you, but for us, this is the kind of challenge we've been preparing for since we first learned to build tools. But the risk, Sub-Counselor Ven's hologram flickered with concern. If you fail, then we fail trying to save lives. Chen interrupted firmly. That's what humans do. When we see someone in trouble, we help. Doesn't matter if they're from Earth or the other side of the galaxy. The aliens were silent for a long moment as their translators processed this. Finally, Zixra spoke, their energy patterns showing what the humans had learned to recognize as understanding. We had heard that humans were dangerous. Now we begin to see that this danger is not just in your ability to survive, but in your willingness to risk that survival for others. Exactly, Torres said, already running final checks on his engine designs. Now let's go save some luminary. As the team began their final preparations, their alien observers watched with a new appreciation. Perhaps they realized the very traits that made humans Deathworlders were exactly what the galaxy needed right now, not despite their dangerous nature, but because of it. Hours later, the Stardancer detached from Earth orbital, its experimental engines pushing it toward a rendezvous with destiny. In the ship's command center, Chen watched her crew work with practiced efficiency. Dr. Patel monitored the star's deterioration, while Rodriguez fine-tuned their approach vector. Wang continued his work on replicating the luminary's vital radiation frequencies, and Torres coaxed every bit of power he could from their engines. Through the reinforced viewport, their destination appeared as a smear of chaos against the starfield, a solar system in its death throes. But where others saw impossible odds, Chen saw only another problem to solve. After all, humans had been beating impossible odds since they first looked up at the stars and decided to reach them. All systems go, Torres reported, his voice steady despite the growing gravitational stresses, ready to show the galaxy what Deathworlders can do. Chen smiled, her hands firm on the control panel. Let's go make the impossible possible. The Stardancer plunged deeper into the dying solar system, its hull gleaming against the chaotic backdrop of the collapsing star. In the ship's command center, warning lights flashed as the environmental conditions exceeded anything in known space. The alien observers huddled in their protected area, watching in a mixture of horror and fascination as the human crew seemed to grow more focused and alive as the danger increased. Radiation levels at 80,000 times standard tolerance, Dr. Patel reported, her cybernetic eyes processing the data streams. She took a sip from her coffee mug, an action that made the Melraxi representative's petals curl in disbelief. Hull integrity holding at 97%. Gravitational stresses increasing. Torres called from his station, his heavy world muscles straining against the growing forces. Compensators are handling it, but it's like being in a centrifuge inside a hydraulic press. He grinned. Reminds me of that time we had to rescue those miners from the Neptune deep core facility. A massive solar flare erupted from the dying star, its energy output enough to vaporize most ships instantly. The Stardancer's shields, based on Earth's magnetic field, caught the blast and channeled it away. Chen adjusted their course, her movements precise despite the increasing gravity. Dr. Wang, she called out, how's our luminary life support coming? Wang's prosthetic arms danced across his controls, making final adjustments to the crystalline chamber they designed. The frequency replicator is stable. We can maintain their vital radiation needs for up to 72 hours. He paused, checking another reading. Assuming we survive that long. First time for everything, Rodriguez quipped, though her scarred hands never stopped moving across her console. Contact with luminary settlement in 3 minutes. Through the reinforced viewport, they caught their first glimpse of the luminary civilization. Massive crystalline structures orbited their dying sun in a complex dance, each one housing thousands of the light-based beings. But even from this distance, they could see the structures were failing, cracks appearing as the star's death throes intensified. "Beautiful," Patel whispered, then frowned at her readings. "And in bigger trouble than we thought. The crystal lattice of their habitats is beginning to destabilize. They've got hours at most, not days." "Can we modify our plan?" Chen asked, already knowing the answer. Humans always modify their plans. "The backup plan for the backup plan." Torres laughed. "Already on it. Remember how we stabilized that quantum reactor breach in the lunar colonies?" "That was on a much smaller scale," Wang pointed out, but his prosthetic arms were already recalibrating their equipment. "Though if we reverse the polarity of our shield generators and use the gravitational stresses to our advantage," Paddle continued, her cybernetic eyes gleaming as she ran the calculations. "We might just be crazy enough to pull this off," Rodriguez finished, already plotting the new approach vector. The alien observers watched this exchange in stunned silence. "You're developing a new rescue plan while inside conditions that should have killed you already." Sub-Counselor Ven's hologram flickered with disbelief. "Welcome to how humans work," Chen replied, not taking her eyes off the controls. "We do our best thinking under pressure. Torres, give me everything the engines have. Paddle, reconfigure those shields. Wang, start the frequency modifications. Rodriguez, take us in." The Stardancer surged forward, its hull creaking as it pushed through the increasing chaos. The star above them writhed like a living thing, sending out waves of plasma and radiation that would have annihilated any other ship. But this ship had been built by a species that called such conditions challenging rather than impossible. They reached the first luminary habitat just as another solar flare erupted. The crystalline structure was beautiful, but clearly failing, its perfect geometry distorting under the stellar forces. Through the structure's transparent walls, they could see the luminary themselves, beings of pure light and crystal, their forms pulsing with increasing desperation. "Initial contact established," Wang reported, his voice tense but controlled. "Their language is based on light patterns, similar to some deep-sea Earth species." Translating now. The luminary's message appeared on their screens. "Help impossible. Death accepted. Why do you risk?" Chen's response was immediate. "Because we can help. Because you need it. That's all the reason humans ever need." There was a pause, then new patterns. "Your species, the Deathworlders. The Council spoke of you, said you were dangerous." "They're not wrong," Rodriguez muttered, her scared face reflecting the star's chaotic light. "But sometimes you need dangerous people." Another solar flare, bigger than the last, illuminated the scene. The luminary habitat's crystal structure began to sing with a high, dangerous frequency. Stress fractures appeared across its surface, spreading like spider webs. "Now or never," Chen announced, her voice carrying the calm of someone who had faced death so many times it had become just another adversary to overcome. "Show them what humanity's brand of dangerous can do." As the Stardancer moved into position, its human crew prepared to attempt something that had never been done before, something that every other species in the galaxy had deemed impossible. But then, humanity had built its entire civilization on doing the impossible. The dying star pulsed with apocalyptic fury as the Stardancer executed its desperate plan. Inside the ship's command center, warning indicators had long since passed from red into purple, a color specifically designed for conditions beyond normal danger parameters. The alien observers had fallen silent, their translation units overwhelmed by the rapid-fire exchange of technical terms and crisis protocols between the human crew. "Crystal resonance frequencies locked," Wang reported, his prosthetic arms moving with impossible speed across his controls. Starting Phase 1 of the transfer process. The ship's experimental shields expanded, creating a protective bubble around the nearest luminary habitat. Inside, thousands of crystalline beings pulsed with a mixture of fear and hope, their light patterns reflecting off the fracturing walls of their home. Structural integrity of their habitat at 18% and falling, Patel called out, her cybernetic eyes tracking multiple data streams simultaneously. We have maybe 3 minutes before total collapse. Torres cursed as he rerouted power from non-essential systems. The gravitational shear is worse than we calculated. It's like trying to juggle neutron stars in a hurricane. He paused, grinning despite the sweat pouring down his face. Actually, that gives me an idea. Chen nodded, recognizing the look in her engineer's eyes. It was the same look that had saved lives during the Martian dust storm crisis, the same spark that had led to the breakthrough in deep-sea colony design. Do it. Torres's fingers flew across his console, implementing modifications that would have made most engineers faint, reversing the polarity of our gravitational compensators. Instead of fighting the star's pull, we're going to use it. The ship shuddered as its systems reconfigured. Outside, the shield bubble began to pulse in sync with the dying star's gravitational waves, creating a resonance pattern that actually strengthened their protective field. Now that's thinking like a Deathworlder, Rodriguez commented, her scarred hands steady on the navigation controls. Using the thing that's trying to kill you to save yourself. The Malraxi representative's pedals trembled. Such conditions, your species truly evolved to think this way. Had to, Chen replied, not taking her eyes off the tactical display. Earth doesn't believe in easy solutions. Wong, start the transfer. The crystalline chamber they'd prepared hummed to life, generating the exact frequency of radiation the luminary needed to survive. One by one, streams of living light began to flow from the failing habitat into the chamber, each being's crystalline pattern preserved perfectly in the transition. Transfer at 15%, Wong reported. But the radiation levels are climbing faster than predicted. Our shielding won't hold forever. Another solar flare erupted, this one massive enough to make the previous ones look like sparklers. The Stardancer's hull creaked ominously as temperature differentials threatened to tear it apart. Hull breach in Section 7, Patel shouted. Emergency containment holding, but barely. Chen's mind raced through options, calculations, possibilities. Earth had prepared them for this, not these exact conditions, but the principle of facing the impossible and finding a way through. Torres, give me everything you've got. Patel, reroute power from life support to the shields. That'll leave us with only 15 minutes of air, Rodriguez pointed out. Then we better work fast, Chen replied with a grim smile. The alien observers watched in horror as the humans voluntarily compromised their own survival systems to save others. This is madness. Sub-Counselor Ven's hologram flickered. You'll kill yourselves. Maybe, Torres grunted, his enhanced muscles straining as he manually adjusted power relays. But we'll save them first. The transfer continued, a stream of living light flowing between structures as the star above them began its final collapse. Warning systems screamed as conditions exceeded their ability to measure. The ship's hull glowed from the heat, its experimental scales the only thing keeping them from vaporizing instantly. Transfer at 60%, Wong called out. Their habitat's failing faster now. Crystal structure showing critical stress patterns. Another series of cracks appeared across the luminary structure, its once perfect geometry distorting under forces that should have been impossible to survive. But inside the Stardancer, a crew of Deathworlders fought against those same forces, using every trick, technique, and desperate innovation their species had learned from surviving on Earth. Transfer at 85%, Wong updated. But our containment field is starting to fluctuate. The radiation's affecting the crystalline matrix. Chen watched the numbers scroll across her display, making calculations no eye would have attempted under these conditions. Sometimes survival required human intuition, the kind that evolved from millions of years of facing death and finding a way through. Patel, "Synchronize our shield frequency with the containment field," she ordered. "Rodriguez, push us closer. Torres, do what you do best. Break the laws of physics." Torres grinned, already implementing changes that would have made traditional engineers scream. Just another Tuesday on Earth. The Stardancer moved closer to the failing habitat, its systems pushed far beyond their design specifications. But they had been built by humans who had never accepted design specifications as absolute limits. As the star above them began its final death throes, the crew of the Stardancer raced against time and physics itself, determined to prove that sometimes the most dangerous species in the galaxy were exactly what was needed when the impossible needed to be made possible. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. Representatives from across the galaxy watched in stunned silence as the holographic display showed the final moments of the rescue operation. The dying star had finally collapsed, its death throes sending waves of destruction across its system. But against all probability, against all known laws of physics, a single ship was emerging from the chaos. The Stardancer's hull glowed like a newborn star, its experimental scales nearly burned away. Behind it, the rescued luminary pulsed with life in their crystalline chambers, their light patterns expressing emotions no translation system could fully capture. Transfer complete. Wang's tired voice came through the Council's communication system. All 15,327 luminary successfully preserved. Crystalline matrix stability at 99.8%. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of celebrations, each species expressing joy in their own way. Light patterns danced across crystal surfaces, energy beings pulsed with brilliant colors, and even the usually stoic plant-like species swayed in synchronized patterns. In the Council's medical bay, the human crew was recovering from their ordeal. Their bodies, pushed to the absolute limits of endurance, bore new scars, both visible and invisible. But their eyes held the satisfaction of those who had stared into the impossible and didn't blink. "Your species," High Counselor Zixray addressed Commander Chen, their energy form pulsing with complex emotions. "We had categorized you as dangerous, as primitive, as Deathworlders." They paused, their translation unit struggling to convey the depth of their next words. "We were right, and we were wrong." Chen, still wearing the burns from when she'd manually realigned the shield generators, smiled. "Being dangerous isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes the universe needs people who look at the impossible and see a challenge." The Melraxi representative, their petals now curved in respect rather than condescension, approached. "The modifications your engineer made to the gravitational compensators, they violated 3 laws of physics we thought were immutable." Torres prefers to think of it as aggressive reinterpretation of theoretical limits. Rodriguez chuckled from her medical bed, her new scars adding to her collection of survival stories. Dr. Patel, her cybernetic eyes temporarily offline from radiation exposure, nodded. "Earth taught us that laws of physics are more like guidelines when you're desperate enough. The universe is more flexible than you think. You just have to be stubborn enough to push back when it pushes you." "But the risk," Sub-Counselor Ven's hologram flickered with lingering concern. "Your species willingly faces death. To save lives." Wang interrupted, his prosthetic arms still making minor adjustments to the luminary containment systems. "Every time. That's not a Deathworlder thing. That's a human thing." The Council Chamber's main display activated, showing the rescued luminary being carefully transferred to a new habitat specially designed by the human team. Their crystalline forms pulsed with patterns that the translator interpreted as songs, ancient hymns of survival and gratitude, now with new verses about the dangerous allies who had made the impossible possible. "The galaxy is changing," Zixray announced to the assembled representatives. "For 10,000 years, we have sought to eliminate danger, to create perfect safety. But today we have learned that sometimes, when faced with an uncaring universe, the ability to be dangerous, to be willing to risk everything to help others, is the greatest gift of all." Chen watched as the Council began drafting new protocols, establishing Earth as the go-to resource for impossible rescues and crisis response. The term Deathworlder was being redefined in real time, transforming from a mark of concern to a badge of honor. Commander, Torres called from his workstation, where he was already drafting improvements to their rescue systems. The luminary asked if we could help them design their new home. Apparently, they want to incorporate some Deathworlder engineering principles into it. Tell them yes, Chen replied, a familiar glint in her eye. After all, that's what neighbors do. As the council chamber buzzed with excited discussions about this new era of cooperation, Chen reflected on humanity's journey. From a species trapped on a death world, forced to evolve resilience and innovation just to survive, to becoming the galaxy's ultimate rescue service. It wasn't the role anyone had expected humans to play in the cosmic community, but perhaps it was exactly what the universe needed. The Stardancer would need repairs, the crew would need rest, and there would be endless debates about the protocols they'd broken during the rescue. But somewhere in the galaxy, a civilization that had faced extinction now had a future because a group of Deathworlders had refused to accept impossibility as an answer. You know what this means, Rodriguez said, looking at the streams of incoming diplomatic requests from various species suddenly interested in human crisis management techniques. Yeah, Chen smiled, already thinking about the improvements they could make to their rescue systems. We've got work to do. In the vastness of space, countless civilizations faced their own impossible challenges. But now they had hope, because somewhere out there, a species of Deathworlders was ready to help, not despite their dangerous nature, but because of it. After all, sometimes the most dangerous thing in the universe is exactly what you need to survive it.